We're going to look at Dr. Kerry-Ann Escayg. She is an associate member of the early childhood education at the University of Nebraska-Omaha. Her research areas are anti-racism in early childhood education, children and race, Black children's racial identity development, racial socialization, and qualitative research with young children. She has published extensively on anti-racism in early childhood education, including several peer-reviewed articles, books, and book chapters. So Dr. Escayg is also the founder and executive director of the Anti-Racist Early Childhood Institute, which is an online training center for early childhood educators. Let us now look and listen to her presentation as we move towards her talking about parents. Her topic, how as Caribbean parents we can foster a decolonized consciousness in early childhood years. And I hand over to Kerry-Ann. Hi, Kerry-Ann. Over to you.
Hello. First off, I just want to say thank you to the organizers for having me. And thank you for everyone who has gathered here today. It's been a long while since I last visited Trinidad, so this virtual convening of my fellow Caribbean people is much appreciated. I saw some people here joining us from Trinidad. Glad that you are with us. So my presentation is entitled Leading the Way, How Caribbean Parents Can Foster a Decolonized Anti-Colonial Consciousness in the Early Years. First, in keeping with the theme of decolonization, my pedagogical approach for this presentation is grounded in the Caribbean and Black diaspora cultural tradition of storytelling. Additionally, I include questions for you to reflect on your own experience and make connections to your professional practice and your daily lives. So the agenda for my talk includes the following. The context. Let's start by exploring the Caribbean context, living in the vestiges of colonial rule. What do we mean by decolonization, specifically in the early years? From then, I'll proceed to discuss parenting practices in the broader racial socialization literature, and then connect that to Caribbean parents. And I'll also be giving you some practical suggestions. So, anyone knows the title of this talk, Massa Day Done? Just put it in the chat box if you know where I got this from. Think back to Caribbean history. This was Dr. Eric Williams' speech on the 22nd of March, 1961. It was his public lecture in Woodford Square. And it speaks to contemporary issues in many ways. For instance, despite the formal trappings of independence, the English-speaking Caribbean continues to grapple with the effects of colonization and the vestiges of colonization. While these are particularly pronounced in the economic sphere, racial ideologies that permeate Caribbean societies also point to the lingering effects of colonialism and the prevailing influence of neo-colonialism. In the early years specifically, research with Caribbean children between the ages of 3 and 5 has consistently shown or revealed a preference for whiteness. I've discovered this in my own doctoral study with Trinidadian children. However, some Caribbean parents rarely discuss race and skin color with children. In the racial socialization literature, we find that when parents engage in these practices that support positive racial identity, those same children do not exhibit a preference for whiteness. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They demonstrate strong racial pride. In one of my interviews with preschool Trinidadian children, I gave them the opportunity to select crayons or any other drawing materials to draw a picture of themselves. And if they wanted to draw someone else, they were allowed to do so as well. So the little girl looked at me and said, "I want to draw my sister," to which I responded, of course, sure, no problem. She looked at the she looked at the crayons, she looked at the markers, and she said, "I don't want to draw black and ugly." She recognized, she knew the color of the skin color of her sister, but she had equated that, she had imputed a specific meaning, a specific value to Blackness. Now, my question is, and it's for you and it's for educators, parents, why did this child equate Blackness, Black identity with being ugly? This harkens back to my earlier point about living in the vestiges of colonial rule, right? The colonial racial logic that ascribed superiority to whiteness still very much dominates Caribbean society. This is not to suggest, however, I want to be very clear, this is not to suggest that all Caribbean people have internalized colonial racial logic and have not challenged it. In fact, I know of some people who are very proud of their African ancestry. But we're dealing with an issue that is societal and has yet to be fully dismantled. Which leads me to my other point. What does it mean to decolonize the early years and early childhood education? Drawing on the existing literature of decolonization, my conceptualization of this involves the following. To decolonize means to subvert the colonial belief systems, including anti-Blackness, that position whiteness as superior. And we find evidence of this in curriculum materials. We find evidence of this in even how we teach. There's an excellent book by the title of Plantation Pedagogy. The name of the author escapes me, but when we're thinking about how to decolonize, we must first trace the manifestations of colonization. Whiteness in terms of appearance, values, interests, knowledge, ways of knowing and being in the world. Every time I go to Trinidad, I'm just speaking from my own positionality, my identity, and lived experience here. And I see Black children. And the only toys that they have do not look like them. My soul weeps. They have the book bag with the white princess. They have the white dolls. They have all these materials that symbolize a nascent form of colonization. Why is that? What are we doing to our children's hearts, minds, and souls when we pour into them the same colonial logic that was used to oppress, to dehumanize our ancestors? Why have we taken up the master's tools and use it on the most vulnerable of our population, young children? To decolonize means we reclaim, we value, we exalt our Caribbean identity and sociocultural knowledge. I really like the fact that Andrea mentioned that about the lack of Caribbean materials. When I was growing up, not to date myself, but I went to, those very academic-centered preschools, and we had that, that book, The West Indian Readers, if anyone familiar with that. The West Indian Readers, Dan is the man in the van. And I look at that textbook and I say, what message are we sending to children when we use these materials? Where is the Caribbean body of knowledge? Where's the Caribbean literature, children's literature, that could facilitate this anti-colonial consciousness? To decolonize means we enact our agency as citizens, as parents, and as human beings. You see, decolonization, the essence of it is resistance. And we have been doing that as Caribbean people. We have resisted politically. We have resisted in the arts. For example, if you were to read some of the Caribbean literature, those are clear examples of decolonization. So in essence, to decolonize is to be free from any remnant, from any influence of the colonial encounter. I situate my work within the anti-colonial Caribbean framework, which is an interdisciplinary framework that foregrounds historical analysis and critiques of colonization in relation to the social, economic, education, and psychological effects that continue to impact Caribbean peoples. This is taken with my work from along with Dr. Kincaid Clark, who's at UWE in Mona campus. Anti-colonial Caribbean theory conceptualized colonization and decolonization from a lifespan perspective by including the period of childhood and by examining how such early experiences are manifested in adult life, particularly in the areas of social, emotional well-being and development. Children's racial identity is part of social emotional development and should be treated with the same intentionality when it comes to other domains of development. Now, let's look at the parenting piece, right? What are some parenting practices that support decolonization? First, what does it mean to parent from an anti-colonial or decolonizing perspective? It means you affirm your child's skin color and hair texture. And I know, like I said before, some Caribbean parents are doing that already. But for those who have not, I want you to think about why you're not doing it. And in the absence of these conversations, what are these children internalizing about their identity, about their color, about their skin texture? Because we know colorism is rife in the Caribbean. Just take a look at the ads, the advertisements for some of these companies. Who is positioned, right, in a dominant way? Right? Whose face are you seeing first? It means you create a home environment that reflects children's racial or cultural heritage. So the books, the toys, and also because we're living in a technology-driven era, what kind of YouTube channels you're letting your children watch, right? What type of YouTube videos you're letting your child watch. There is Beano and Fino for Black children. There's the other one that centers Black children, that represents Black children. So if you're a parent right now, I want you to consider doing what I call a home environment audit. This would involve you examining all the toys, all the books that you buy for your child, all the social media or anything like that you allow, from a critical perspective. And your guiding question while you are conducting this audit is, why did I purchase this? How is this particular item either supporting or not supporting my child's positive racial identity or feeling good about her skin color and hair texture? First, however, parents themselves must be decolonized. As the old saying goes, you cannot teach what you do not know. Again, I have some guiding questions for you. What subtle and explicit messages about race, skin color, hair texture are you sending to your child? What TV shows or movies do you watch? What books do you read? Do any of these represents Blackness in a positive light? Or are all of these materials centered on glorifying whiteness at the expense of Blackness and other racialized identities? I want us now to transition to comparing the data with Black American children. And this refers to what I mentioned earlier about the racial socialization literature when parents talk to children about their race, when they help to cultivate that racial pride. The result is that Black children are confident in who they are and they love Blackness. So this is taken from my work with Black American children. So one of the students said, because I don't want to be white. I mean, I like my skin how it is, and I don't want to change or anything, so I just like my skin color. My mom and dad, they're really kind and really like caring. They always tell me how I'm doing, and they also always tell me how I look, and they also say, you look really beautiful. And yeah, the one thing I like about my life is that my parents are involved in it. And another student said, it feels like I'm not supposed to be white. I want to be Black. Yes, I love being Black. I love being me. I don't want to be like white. Now, I gave them the choice to use their own pseudonym. So that's why you see Pizza here, because she decided to call herself Pizza. I also had one student who decided to call herself as a pseudonym Black Lives Matter. Therefore, demonstrating how much she has loved Blackness and embraces her identity. In conclusion, I want to reiterate some central points. Parents are children's main socialization agent. As such, they play a pivotal role in shaping children's social and emotional development. Decolonization is a collective and an individual effort. As visionaries, as Caribbean scholars, as parents, we recognize the resistance and the daily realities of the colonial strongholds. Nevertheless, it is incumbent upon us to do the following. We persist and we hold on to the possibilities of change, of hope, of finally saying, Massa de done. Thank you.